Janine from Orinda Books, and I'm glad you found time in your day to join a conversation about books and writing. We have a great discussion ahead with Dallas Woodburn and Vanessa Hua. Dallas just published her debut young adult novel, The Best Week That Never Happened. And so first, we'll just have some introductions here. Vanessa is an award-winning, best-selling author and columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. Her novel, A River of Stars, was selected for NPR's Best Books of 2018 and has been called a marvel by the Oprah magazine. Her short story collection, Deceit and Other Possibilities, received an Asian Pacific American Award in Literature, a National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow. She has received a Brona Jaffe Award, a James D. Phelan Award, and a Steinbeck Fellowship in Creative Writing. And I'd like to add that Vanessa has been a huge supporter of Orinda Books, always donating her time and just really promoting the indie bookstore spirit. And Dallas is a recent John Steinbeck Fellow in Creative Writing at San Jose State and a 4-time Pushcart Prize nominee. Her short stories have appeared in Cicada, Ziziva, The Nashville Review, Fourth River, and Monkey Bicycle, among many others. And her short stories have won the Cypress and Pine Short Fiction Award. Woodburn has published more than 80 articles and essays in national markets, including the Los Angeles Times, Family Circle, Writer's Digest, Modern Lost, Justine, and 24 Chicken Soup for the Soul titles. She's the founder of Write On Books, an organization empowering youth reading and writing endeavors. All right, I'll hand it over to you, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Oh, are we going to get bigger or?
I think this might be it.
Okay, great. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Janine. And, Orinda Books is my hometown bookstore. It's the bookstore I went to growing up, dreaming about being an author someday. So it's such a pleasure to be able to be doing this event with you, Dallas, here, so to speak, today.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Yeah. So I thought we'd start off to talk a bit about your wonderful debut, and then we can begin to speak more broadly about just the writing life and what it means to be writing in 2020. So yeah, tell me about the inspiration for your novel, which, features 2 teenage main characters, Tegan Rossi and a childhood friend, Kai, she met while on vacation in Hawaii. And it's just very, tender and evocative, but there's also, a mystery and a bit of the supernatural. And so I would just love to hear you, talk about your novel, your inspiration for it, and, what it was, what was like to write this book.
Thanks. And just thank you so much, Vanessa, for doing this event with me. I remember when we were Steinbeck Fellows together, just dreaming of one day having books out and doing events like this together. So it's just, I'm really grateful to you for being so supportive of my work and doing this event with me. It's really special.
We did it. We got our books published. Yay!
We did it. So my book, I'll show the book cover, The Best Week That Never Happened. I like to describe it as a love story set in Hawaii with a dash of mystery and magic about living each day to the fullest. And most of my story ideas come with character first, but this one actually, the setting and the first scene of the book really was what just came into my consciousness first, where my main character Tegan wakes up in the lava tubes of Hawaii with no idea how she got there or what she's doing there. And not to get too heavy, right away, but this book actually came after a period when I hadn't been writing for a while. I was grieving the loss of one of my best friends from college, passed away in a car accident. And it was my first real sharp experience with loss, especially so sudden. She was so young and just full of life and vibrant. And and so I really was lost after she died, and I wasn't writing for a while. It was one of the first times in my life actually where I kind of felt like I couldn't write, and I didn't really see the purpose of it. Like, how could I spend time, what was the point analyzing my character's psyches when just my friend had just died. So I was kind of lost. And then just one day this idea came from me of this first scene, and it was just in my mind really vivid, and it wouldn't let me go. I just kept thinking about it, and then kind of the central question of the book, it takes place over a week, and it kind of thinks about this idea of like the best week of someone's life, and so I just kind of dove in, and I wrote this book much more quickly than previous novels. This is my first published novel, but my fourth completed manuscript, and so it was really a journey for me. And even though it happened after this period, this time when my friend had passed away, I didn't make a connection like, oh, I'm writing this book about grief and loss and coming to terms with, this my friend's death. It wasn't until I finished the first draft and a close friend read it over who knew my friend who had died as well, and she said, oh my gosh, like Celine is in this book every page, that I just realized my subconscious, I think, just was working through a lot of that, even though I didn't fully realize it myself. So it feels like a special book in a lot of ways to me personally, and I just feel really excited to have it out in the world. And yeah.
Yeah, it's thank you for sharing that story. It's so touching and so moving. And I think in a bit we'll sort of talk more about this, but it seems often that people want writers to say like, oh, because of this happened, there's a direct line between one thing and another, when in fact, like, it reflects all sorts of things that were, going on inside you or happening in your life, and it came in sideways, right? It's not about your friend, but it's about grief and loss and coming to terms with mortality. So so beautifully done. What were the kinds of books you read when you were growing up? Is this the sort of book you wish you'd had access to, or is this book sort of in the vein of some books that you loved growing up?
Yeah, I definitely, when I was writing this book, I wanted to write something that I would love to read. I think that one of the best advice I received as a writer is to try to turn off those voices in your head that are just worried about, especially when you're writing the first draft, worried about what other people will think of it, worried about the market or selling or anything like that, and instead try to just write a story that you love and write something that you would really want to read. So yes, it was a book that I would love to read. I still love reading young adult genre. So I fell in love as a teenager with young adult. I do think it's just evolved so much in the years since I was a teenager, with just complicated relationship situations, kind of adult problems that are seen in this genre compared to the way that it used to be. I think one other thing that I just really wanted to show was this very loving, positive relationship between my two main characters. I've been in, some relationships in the past, especially as a teenager, where, looking back, there were some unhealthy habits going on, or like codependency or feeling unworthy. And I guess I really wanted to show a loving relationship where my main character, Tegan, is really seen and valued for exactly, who she is.
I was really rooting for them as a couple. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was fun to get to know the characters better as I was writing, and to explore their relationship. And as I was writing also, Vanessa, I didn't fully realize that it was going to be a young adult book as I was working on the first draft. My characters are 18, so they're just out of high school. But I was really focused on just unpacking their story. And then after the draft was done and I was working with my agent more on it and stuff, and then we were kind of deciding how do we want to market it. But I've heard some other writers, like one of my friends from my MFA program at Purdue, Natalie Lund, she's another great young adult writer, and she was telling me something similar with her young adult debut, that when she was writing it, she wasn't sure that it was young adult, and then that kind of came in later. So sometimes people ask me, about that part in the process, and I think that definitely there are certain things, with different genres that you need to be aware of when you're writing. But I think also there might be some freedom to just write the best book that you feel like you can write, as opposed to feeling like, oh, I need to write a young adult book. I think sometimes people maybe talk down to younger readers in a way that isn't necessary or helpful.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think the book Incident of the Dog, The Curious Incident of the Dog, Nighttime, wonderful book.
I love that book. Yeah.
But I had heard in England it's marketed as both YA and literary fiction. In the US it was marketed as literary fiction. There were like different covers. So in some ways, like YA maybe becomes a marketing question, like somewhere down the line, maybe when your book is getting sold, or maybe the way it's positioned in a house. So like things that are sort of like, as you said, you just have to write the book that you're going to write. So,
yeah, exactly.
So have you heard from, your book came out in April, is that?
Yeah, end of April. Mm-hmm.
So I guess we can talk about first, have you heard from readers, and could you talk about that part of the process, and just also what's it been like to have a book come out in the middle of a pandemic and also sort of a crisis, national soul searching?
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting because it feels like it's been a lot longer that it's been out. I mean, it's funny, the other day I was talking with my husband and we were counting the weeks and think, oh, it's only been out for like 6 or 7 weeks. It feels like it's been months, just because time is so strange right now. And it's also kind of funny that I think sometimes readers don't know with publishing that it can be a very slow process. So I sold the book back in the summer of 2018. And so it just was an interesting feeling of waiting for April 2020 for so long, and then it arrived and it was just so different than what I had, expected. And I think in some ways it's been, I'm grateful for just having the book come out and having this sense of community around the book. For example, when on the day my book was released, it was almost like my professional wedding. I don't know if you felt this way with your.
It's like the prom, your wedding, all rolled in one.
It's just everything, right? I just felt so, loved and supported, and really just connected with people, which I think during this time of shelter in place I appreciated it more than ever, to have that support of people. And in some ways it's also put things very starkly into perspective. So if I think back to January 2020, when I had all these concerns about marketing and sales numbers and certain things, that then by the time the book came out, it was more about just being happy and grateful that my book would hopefully reach readers, and very aware that there are much worse problems that I could be having than low sales numbers. And so I think in a lot of ways it did, put things into perspective in a nice way. And I've heard from readers that since my book takes place in Hawaii, that they felt like they were able to, travel through reading the book, even though they're not able to travel right now. And I guess just hoping, my book is about mortality and loss and grief, but it's also a love story, and it's really an escape. And I think of it as being a pretty lighthearted read in a lot of ways. I hope that people feel uplifted from reading it. And so just, I guess, hoping that my book might be an escape from some of the heaviness, if people are looking for that. And I have heard really wonderful messages from readers. In particular, it's been nice. People have read the book that I didn't quite expect to. So my book is young adult love story. Main character is an 18-year-old girl. And my 93-year-old grandfather read it. I don't think he even knows what Instagram is, which is, in the book. I'm sure there were things he didn't understand, but it was just so lovely, that he read it. And my friend Celine's family, she's the one who passed away, just sent me really lovely response to it. So it's I've just been touched by the feedback that it's received. And and also I'll just always remember my debut novel. It's an interesting story to look back on about coming out during this time.
Right. Well, I just remember there's different online groups for books, authors who have books coming out shortly or debuts, and a lot of people worried last year, like, oh, if I come out in the fall, all the presidential election stuff will eat up the coverage. Little did they know what else would be might be coming. So
yes, yeah, I'm in one of those groups, and one of the authors wrote a comment about something like, it's funny to think how excited I was for 2020.
Right, it's going to be our best year yet.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest that anyone who's participating, feel free to log into the chat box and type in a question, and I'll sort of sort through them after our conversation here. If it is possible for you to do it, I'm not sure if it's enabled with the webinar. So tell me about, how old is your daughter now? Like what, your mother-in-law is watching her right now, so that you can do this wonderful event, but like, what's it been like, managing the book launch and writing with your, is she a year now or?
Yeah, she's 18 months.
Oh, okay.
Just turned 18 months. It's crazy how quickly she's growing and changing. She learned to walk during the shelter in place. So now she's running all over the house. So just in the span of a few months, that's been a big change. She's just wonderful. I mean, she's so full of energy and joy. And while it can be demanding and stressful at times to be parenting this vibrant, enthusiastic 18-month-old, kind of stuck at home, just as my husband's working from home. And before the pandemic, I often would take my daughter lots of places just to get out of the house and go to parks and gymboree and things like that, that we're not doing anymore. So in some ways, it's challenging to feel like I'm I'm her entertainment all day. But in other ways, it's very refreshing to spend all day with her, because she has no idea what's going on, and she's just, living her best life, and she's just so in the moment, and fearless and joyful. And so it's really nice, I guess, to have that levity during the day too, where when she throws a giant tantrum because I won't let her walk around eating food, it's just it's funny to see, like, that's her biggest problem right now. But she loves books, which is really cool already. Even at 18 months, she really loves reading. And it was one neat thing was when I received my advanced review copies of my novel, and I was opening the box and just so excited, and she was right in there with me. Like, I thought that she either could care less, or that she would maybe try to eat them or something. But it was really lovely. She picked up one of the books and she was looking at it, and it was like she wanted to read it. And so I don't know, she seems sometimes to have a sense of things that are, special. But yeah, I feel even more grateful now. I thought when my daughter was born that I had no writing time anymore, and it was so hard to find time. And then now I look back to before the pandemic, and I'm like, oh, I had so much more writing time than I do now, because at least then we were able to have more sitters come over to watch her and things.
Right.
I'm really grateful. I try to get in half an hour a day, which I'm just grateful for that time. And I don't know about you, Vanessa, but I definitely noticed a difference myself, especially with a longer work. Like, I'm working on a new novel right now, that if I can try to write even just half an hour of it every day, it just helps me stay in the world so much more, that I notice a big difference if I take off, if I try to write, an hour here, and then a few days later I'm trying to write again. It's just much harder for me to like get back into the scene and into the world. So I found, if there are any people listening that are trying to find time to write, the busy life, that for me, even just half an hour can really add up, even if I can just write a couple hundred words a day. But doing it every day, like, really helps me stay in that world, and make some progress. So I'm learning to be grateful for even those little bits of time.
Yeah, I think novelist Jamie Attenborough, she does this thing called 1,000 Words of Summer. I think it's for like 2 weeks or a month, where she just, that is if you're sort of play on Twitter, but like what she does is sort of encourage people to get out those 1,000 words every day, and she'll bring in guest speakers, like different writers, on how you can, if that's a sort of community that can help spur you. I think a lot of writers I've talked to have said they've found it helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think for me, so my boys are 8 turning 9, and so definitely spending a lot more time with them than before. In some ways, it's we've settled into a routine. We'll usually go for a daily hike. But in other days, like, it can be very frustrating because it's like you have a deadline for my weekly column, or I'm in the middle of novel edits and you just kind of want to sit with it. But, it's that thought, like, if you get something done, no matter how small, it's still something you got done, and eventually it accumulates. Mm-hmm. So we'll just have to see what the fall holds in terms of whether they'll be in school, if there'll be more of this distance learning, or I don't know. It's very hard to kind of predict even beyond the next couple weeks, right? In life.
Yeah.
Right now. So,
do you have any things that you found yourself doing, especially during this time, to help kind of create this like sustaining writing practice? Or, I mean, I imagine you already have your column, like you mentioned, and your novels, and then your short story collection just came out. I mean, is there anything that has been helpful for you when in this sort of environment?
I mean, I think one thing that I've done, and I did this even before the pandemic, but I always recommend people to make the use of two things. To make the most use of the time that you do have, mm-hmm. meaning I'll use this application on my phone where I'll upload a PDF of my current draft and listen to it when I'm like going for a walk or a run. So that way, cool. Like, I get in, I do feel like movement is an important, like stepping away from the desk is an important part of my writing practice, because that's where it sort of, your subconscious bubbles up and you kind of figure out things. Mm-hmm. So there's that. And then also just, what are my hours of power? For some people, they're night owls. For me, I write best in the morning. So the work that's most important to me creatively, let's say, I'll work on those hours. I'll try, at least I'll try to. Another way of putting it is like, I try to put the best part of my writing self into the hours where I will work best. Mm-hmm. So again, plans don't always go according to, as you've laid them out, but those things have served me well, even on the days where it can be frustrating, or you're just tired, or I've just been like really sad about like what's happening. So, mm-hmm. Figuring that all out. So, yeah. I think we're just in it for the long haul, and we'll have to see what kind of art or writing comes out of it. That it's not, I don't think it's all going to be reactive or only about the pandemic. It's going to influence the way we think about isolation or relationships and touch, and just all sorts of things that we can't really predict now. We're just going to write what we're going to write.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Those are really, I love especially too what you said about stepping away from the work, because I think we're all having to step away, or most of us maybe are having to step away more than we were used to before. And I've noticed that too with myself. I had a great teacher in college, Amy Bender, and she used to say that sometimes her writing, she would try to write for 2 hours a day, and sometimes her writing time would be her, staring out the window and processing things, and that still counted with just her subconscious working through things. And I've been thinking about that some lately because I do spend a lot of time maybe just like watching my daughter, sort of a little bit bored. But I think it can be useful creatively sometimes to have that time when you're just kind of sitting bored somewhere. I think that often in our society, like with smartphones and the internet right at a touch of our hands, that we're just bored so much less because we always want to be productive, or you click over to read something or check your email. And so I have noticed that with my daughter, I try to keep my phone away and just like be playing with her. But it's only so many like stacking rings on a thing you can do. So my mind does wander, and I do feel, I guess it's been a little bit frustrating because I feel like I've gotten more ideas than normal, but then I have less time, to work on them. But yeah, I mean, I think that just thinking of that time is valuable too. And then I also have just been trying to think of my writing time. Like before this, I would think of it as like one more thing on my to-do list. But now I see it as more of a form of, this sounds maybe corny, but like of my self-care time. Like I need this, this half an hour that I get to myself to write is like something I'm doing for myself that helps me stay a little bit more like centered or grounded or sane. That I notice on days if I don't get that in, I just feel much more frazzled and like grumpy the rest of the day. So I don't know. I kind of hope that it's shifted the way that I view my creative life, even after, going forward. I hope that I'm more grateful and see it in that way instead of feeling pressured or like it's just another task on my list.
Or that it's an obligation instead of like,
Yes.
unnecessary, as you said, self-care. So
Yeah.
we're so central to our identity. So I see we have a question from Melissa.
And hi, Melissa.
She says, "Hi, Dallas. Love the book. Wondering how many drafts versions of the novel you went through and how different the final version was from your first draft."
Oh, great question, Melissa. I went through a lot of drafts of the novel. The ending is is different than I had originally envisioned. When I started writing the novel, I had that image for the opening scene, and then pretty quickly on, I got an image for an ending scene of the novel where my main character Tegan goes manta ray snorkeling at nighttime. But I thought that it would end differently than it does at the beginning, or that I thought it was going to end differently than it does. And as I was writing, it became more and more clear the way that I guess the characters wanted it to end. It felt more that way than me like trying to make it go a certain way. That's true for a lot of projects that I work on. I'm not a big outliner for fiction. I usually have like a vague kind of idea of where I'm going, but the middle is often quite murky, and I almost think of it as like I'm swimming across this big body of water, and it's like I'm headed towards the opposite shoreline, but I might end up at a different spot on the shoreline than I originally thought I was headed towards. And yeah, so for this book, but once I got to the ending, it really felt right to me, and like that's the ending the book wanted to have, and that I was happy with. So that was something I wanted to keep. So that stayed the same. And actually the basic structure of the book, so it takes place over a week, Monday through Sunday, and a lot of the events of the book stayed the same, but in revising it, it was mostly fleshing things out, I wanted their relationship to really feel nuanced and real. And I found that I tend to be an underwriter, so my first drafts tend to be shorter than my finished draft. So normally for me, it's when I'm revising, I'm adding more to flesh out what I have in my mind and make it clear on the page. And I was really grateful with this book, so I finished the first draft and went through and made it the best I could be. And then my literary agent gave me some suggestions and helped me make it better. And then we signed with a publisher, and they helped me do developmental edits and other edits. And it was just interesting to me that I would feel like, okay, this is the best I can do. Like, I've made this book the best I can make it. And then I would get more feedback or more ideas. And I just felt like making it better and better and better. So that was a neat experience to go through as a writer, and just feeling like there's, room for growth. And some of the things, so in the book, my character Tegan has an hourglass tattoo over her heart. And that actually came pretty late in that was once the book had already sold to a publisher, and I was doing some edits with my editor at the publishing house. So, and I really love that part of the book. So I'm just glad that I was able to work with other people to not only make sure that I really wanted the details to add up and things to make sense in the world, but also just to get some more inspiration and ideas for some things to sprinkle in.
Did the editor suggest the hourglass, or did she suggest something more generally, like you needed something to suggest the urgency, and kind of left it up to you?
Yeah, that was more that, so there were certain things about the mystery of the book that the editor wanted me to explain a little bit more. And so I was trying to think of a way to show that the character's time is running out over the course of the week. And I wanted a way to like show that concretely. So I didn't want it to just be in her mind, she's thinking that this is happening, or she has to just believe what other characters tell her that this is happening. I wanted it to be some like physical evidence on her body that things are happening. So it was kind of what we were talking about earlier, Vanessa, of just, it was like this question in my mind that I was thinking of, how can I do that? And then, and actually, Vanessa, now that I think about it, so for Deceit and Other Possibilities, Vanessa's first short story collection, that when it first came out, remember you had those awesome tattoos that you gave out. So when I actually did something similar for my book, inspired by you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, even subconsciously, if like maybe that kind of worked its way into my idea of like this tattoo. Yeah, so you never know where the ideas are going to come from. But I'm so glad that, I guess what I mean also is sometimes giving your work space to evolve. Like, I'm a big believer in not going through and editing something too quickly after you finish the first draft, because I think you kind of need time to step away from it and not to seem too rigid and set in stone of what you've written. Like, I think that there's always room for the more ideas to come forth.
Yeah, I'm also not one to outline. I think if you're writing things like, I don't know, thrillers or mysteries, you might need to, but like for me, I think a first draft can really function as the outline itself in a way, because you're discovering the characters and where they end up. Or I always joke that like you figure out the ending, you already know the ending all along, but it has to dredge up your subconsciousness, like in a horror movie where like the call's coming from inside the house. Like, just another thing, just in terms of listening you talk about how you got input from your agent and your editor and probably first readers. And it is very humbling by the time a book ends up in a bookstore, like to think about how many people were a part of bringing this out into the world. Everyone from the cover designer to the guy on the shipping dock who's like carrying your load of books over, and it gets trucked over to the bookstore, and then the bookseller unpacks the books and hosts the event. I mean, all of that is it's very humbling, I think. So.
Yes, yeah, that's such a great way to think of it, and something that I didn't appreciate when I was younger and would just go to bookstores and look at all the books, and I think you see the author's name on the cover and you almost think it just emerges like fully formed from this author's subconscious. But definitely it's I appreciate more when I'm reading books now, and I love reading the acknowledgments in books. I just love going through and seeing all the thank yous, and it also gives me especially before my debut novel came out, before I had a published novel, it would give me hope sometimes to read through and just realize that authors all have these long journeys. What's the saying about overnight successes that take, years and years to happen? And so I think that that's also really just inspiring that if you're a creative person working on your craft, like you have so many people there with you, like in the trenches, going through rejection and disappointment, alongside you and just carrying forward.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't until I went to grad school to get my MFA. I think you have an MFA as well. But I never read the acknowledgments before. Like, I was like, oh, the end is when the book ended. But as soon as I went to grad school, I was like, oh, I wonder who represents this author. I wonder who these authors' friends are. And it is that question of like, how do all these famous writers know each other? And it's like, because they knew each other when they weren't famous. So, and I'm putting heavy quotation marks around famous. So we have another question. And anyone who's listening or watching, please feel free to put it in the chat box. But, two questions. Great. Someone is asking, since you are friends back to when you're Steinbeck Fellows, I'm curious if you have learned anything from one another, or had your writing process or style influenced by the other? It's from your dad.
Oh, it's from my dad. Thanks, Dad. Well, Vanessa, I mean, I think one thing that I've always loved about your work is just your ability to weave in details that like really stick with me and seem so perfect, and make like your characters feel so real. So whether it's your short stories, your novels, your columns, I just feel like you, with your writing, have such a talent with details, and like finding just like the perfect ones that can really like make me feel immersed. So I've always admired that about you. And also I love your humor and your wit in your writing. I don't know if I've, been able to take any of that on through osmosis, but I think when I was writing my book, I was hoping that even though I was struggling with some themes like grief and loss and mortality, that I could also have moments of lightness, moments of humor and of play. So to me, that's also something that I've learned from you. And just you're so supportive of other writers. And I love that about you. You're just so generous with your time and support. And so now that you're famous, you still are that way. You still are. And I just love that about you.
So, thank you, Dallas. I mean, it was such a blessing to be able to be a Steinbeck Fellow with you. You always had such really wonderful insights like that helped me shape my novel. The novel is what I was working on during that fellowship year. And I mean, I think I've always just admired the way you're able to portray the interior life of younger women or of teenagers, like in a really sensitive, nuanced way that isn't, I don't know. I think often people, everyone was a teenager, but they sort of forget what it was, or they get stereotyped or sort of like turned one note, or the character gets flattened, but you just really kind of show the full bloom of what they are and I don't know, you convey the hopefulness, but also the strong emotions of those years and like lots of different settings. And also you've had other stories sort of involving the afterlife or ghosts, and or sort of the fantastical. And I've really admired the way you've been able to pull that off. So
thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so another Carol Irwin. As I said in my chat, I loved your book. I was wondering if I understand it correctly. Well, you can decide how much you want to reveal, but she asked, do the events that occur during the week in Hawaii with Kai and Tegan happen in Kai's dreams, and also perhaps in Tegan's subconsciousness dreams while she is, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Carol. It's funny, it's wonderful, I think, having a book out in the world and getting to hear readers' ideas or responses about the book. Like I've always come at it from, a reader's perspective, where you read the book and you wonder, what the author intended, which I think is fun to hear about. But I also think it's really neat to hear like how readers interpret it too. So I kind of see it as two halves of the same whole, like it's the author and the reader almost like co-creating this story. So yeah, I mean, for me in the book, dreams are a big theme in the book. My friend Lynn, who passed away, I still get to see her in my dreams occasionally, and it's just really special when that happens. And I wanted a way for my characters to be connected and impacted by the events that happen over the course of the week. So yes, throughout the book, there are emails from Kai to Tegan that kind of summarize or reflect on what he has just dreamed about. That was what they experienced that day in the book. And one thing that I wanted to show was that he would have a dream of something that happened with Tegan, and then it would actually impact his actions, I guess, in the real world. So if one thing he's struggling with is this idea about whether he should go to college. He's gotten accepted at CalArts after being waitlisted, and he's always wanted to pursue his art, but he has a lot of fear about that. He feels like maybe he would fail or, come back with his tail between his legs and feel like, he should never have tried. And so in one of the days in the book, which he dreams about, Tegan really kind of calls him out on this and challenges him and encourages him to pursue his dream has always been to pursue his art and go to CalArts. And so then he kind of decides after having this dream with her, as if they had this conversation in real life, that he should go to CalArts. So I intended them to be having a connection through their dreams, but I think it's also interesting to hear how readers interpret it, and I don't think necessarily that like my intention is any more valid than other readers' interpretation of the book too. So that's kind of, to me, one of the fun parts of writing a book that has some level of like mystery or magic in it.
Well, I often feel like readers see what they need most from the book, if that makes sense. Or like whether, as you said, some readers feel like, oh, it's transporting me right now at a time where I'm confined at home, or maybe it's helping another person get through grief, or, they see what they need to see. So is there anything else just about, do you have a sense yet of your next book is YA, or you're just, you'll know it when you finish it, or motherhood, or?
Yeah, that's something that I haven't written about motherhood too much after I've become a mother. So I have in my short story collection, Women Running Late in a Dress, which came out in 2018. And a lot of those stories I'd written drafts of for many years before then. So like from college, grad school on, Steinbeck Fellowship. I was not a mother, and I have mother characters in there. And it's kind of funny that now I am a mother and my characters are teenagers. Maybe it's like a way of escape, or also I remember when I went to grad school in Indiana at Purdue, I started writing a lot of stories set in California. I grew up in Southern California. It was almost like I needed that distance to kind of have some perspective on it. So maybe maybe I have more perspective on teens now, it's like I like to revisit my teen experiences. But yeah, I've completed another novel that's out on submission right now, so it's also young adult.
Fingers
crossed. And then I'm working on another one that is young adult. I'm pretty sure, but I'm hoping that both of them are like The Best Week That Never Happened, where I do hear from readers who are not teens that really love the book, and I'm hoping that adults would love this one as well. It's moving along very slowly in my half an hour a day. I have a vague idea of the ending. I'm not quite sure yet how I'm going to get there, but it has to do with the idea of parallel universes. And another way it's different from me is there are two main point of view characters, so the chapters alternate. So it would be like if The Best Week That Never Happened was told with both Tegan and Kai in alternating chapters, like it's two main point of view characters. So that's been a fun challenge, to try to write two different voices and make sure that trying to weave a narrative that coalesces with those two characters' points of view has been fun. Yeah.
So
How about you?
They're both in the first person, or?
They're both in the first person. Yeah. One's a girl, one's a boy. And actually, if anyone's read my short story collection, there's a story in there called Eric and Steffi, where this boy Eric is visited by the ghost of his sister who passed away before he was born.
Oh, well, yeah, that's one of the most touching stories in the collection. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, they just have it. Those characters have just like really stayed with me. So they're in the novel. Eric has become Jackson. His name is Jackson in the novel, but he's one of the characters, and his sister Steffi is. But I'm learning a lot more about him as I'm in the world of the novel. But so it's been fun to have them, to kind of revisit them.
Yeah, well, the best week that never happened would be the perfect graduation gift, I think, for anyone who's listening. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would love, and Orinda Books has them, and they also, even though I cannot be there to sign them for you in person, they're autographed, and I have some of those little tattoos that they have there too that you could get if you pick it up with Orinda Books.
Yes, and we are actually open at Orinda Books, so come on in. The books are there, or we're happy to deliver in the La Miranda area or in Rossmore. So we'll get the book to you any way you'd like. Thank you so much, Dallas and Vanessa, and to our audience. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.